To another episode of Witty CFB. We have Coach Preston from Trash Talk Tailgate back making another appearance. Dude, it's great to have you on and, excited to talk some ball with you.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It's always a good time to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking off camera too a little bit everything. We've been talking about the SEC in particular, and I know at least for me, one of the big storylines going into 2025 is particularly Texas football, but particularly Arch Manning. He's a redshirt sophomore. We saw a little bit of glimpses of him with two starts, one versus Louisiana Monroe after Quinn Ewers was hurt, and also one game versus Mississippi State too. So a short little tease there in terms of him so far. But what are your general thoughts on Arch Manning, and how do you think Texas offense is going to change going into 2025 compared to Quinn Ewers from last year?
Well, I'm going to get really in depth with this, so I hope that's okay.
No, absolutely. Floor is yours, my friend.
First of all, I think when you look at Texas going into this season, you have to look at, first of all, what they lost. Like, they lost a lot of really key starters, either from graduation or going on to the NFL draft. Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Andrew Makuba, Cam Williams, Quinn Ewers, obviously, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond. Both of them were, really productive wide receivers for them. And their star corner, Jahdae Barron. They lost a lot. And, two of their offensive linemen from a year ago, both of them are probably going to be, early first, late second round picks, somewhere in there. The thing I worry about with Arch is last year, Quinn Ewers, it looked like he was hurt. And, so I'm going to get really in depth with this. So Quinn Ewers was injured, 2 of the last 3 years. He suffered an injury last year. He had a torn oblique, and that's your rotating shoulder. That's how you put put velocity, and that's how you zip the ball basically. Right. And if you notice last year, Texas, they really struggled in the red zone. And if you watch Quinn Ewers, he couldn't drive the ball. He didn't have zip on the ball, I think, because of his injury, and that really affected him in the red zone. Because he would just float balls, he would just throw lobs and floaters. That's what Quinn Ewers did because of the injury. Right. And that really hurt them in the red zone, because in the red zone, everything is a lot more condensed, and it's tighter windows, it's tighter space, so you have to drive the ball. And the thing that I think Texas fans should be worried about a little bit is, yes, Arch Manning is incredibly hyped. He was the number 1 recruit coming out of the 2023 class, I believe. And if Quinn Ewers struggled like that, they never really let Arch, we didn't see as much as Arch as I thought we would with Quinn Ewers struggling and with his injury. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's something to be worried about if you're a Texas fan. I know he has all camp and all offseason to, really try to get better. But when we did see Arch against better competition, he really just ran the ball, didn't really throw the ball that much. So I don't know. I'm not one to believe in hype of all these quarterbacks. I need to see it before I believe it. So I think Texas, if Arch Manning is not, the prospect that everyone thinks he's going to be, I think he's going to be kind of up and down, just like any other really good quarterback, especially because of everything that Texas lost. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, you brought up some really good points too, and especially in this day and age of NIL and the transfer portal and everything too. Everybody always kind of expects quarterbacks to just go in there cold turkey and go in and just ball out. But one other thing too that I think is worth mentioning about Arch is the fact that, for the most part, he's taken a pretty humble approach to this whole thing at Texas, because, even Coach Sark said in a couple interviews too, hey, there's so many other schools that were going out and trying to poach him, saying, hey, we'll offer you, X amount of money. We'll give you this, this, and this. But he decided to take the high road and say, you know what, I'll set 2 years behind Quinn Ewers, learn how Payne learned, learn how, Eli learned and all that. And I think that part of it will definitely make a big difference too, especially having a guy like Coach Sark there to be able to teach you and develop you too. And in terms of how Texas offense is going to change, you definitely brought up a good point about him running the ball more, because it definitely adds a versatility element to it also. But again, you also brought up too that Texas offensive line is definitely being tweaked around a little bit. Yeah, they're always going to have a top 10 recruiting class because they're Texas, right? But it's just a matter of how they kind of put that all together, and exactly how much are they really depending on Arch Manning to score every little touchdown and make every little play versus kind of being a game manager and making sure that he doesn't turn over the ball.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned earlier that Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond are both gone. They were Texas's 2 leading receivers.
Yeah.
I think a guy that's really going to need to step up this year is sophomore wide receiver Ryan Wingo. They kind of used him as a kind of a gadget guy. Like, they'd run, jet sweeps and reverses with him. He's like a superstar track athlete. He's incredibly explosive and fast. So they just try to get him out in space. But can he kind of step up and be more of that go-to, more consistent wide receiver for Arch Manning? And then another thing, Texas fans I think they should be really, really excited about this. I don't think a lot of the country really knows about this, but Texas, they lost one of their best playmakers going into camp last year in running back CJ Baxter.
Yeah.
And he injured his knee, and now, they say he's going to have a full recovery. He should be back 100% going into this year. So, I mean, CJ Baxter comes back. I think that's really going to help them, especially with, kind of the offensive line being in flux a little bit. I think Ryan Wingo stepping up, and I think CJ Baxter coming back is really going to help them. Yeah. But again, if Arch Manning is not who everyone says he's going to be, I think Texas is kind of going to be up and down, because it's really hard to lose that much production and just be able to sustain it. You know what I mean?
Exactly too. And I go back and think about, what's the missing thread between all the teams that were, still in the playoff but didn't make it to the national title game. And one of the things that kind of come to my mind in terms of offense is it was always one thing or the other. Like, they were either so pass heavy to the point where their rushing attack was a liability, or to the point where they just have to rely on their quarterback for every little play. And I think that's where Texas is going to have to kind of find that middle ground. But you did bring up CJ Baxter too, and for those people who aren't Texas fans, go and watch him when the spring game rolls around. And, go watch some of his highlight films from last year, because the guy's electric, and I do think he is going to make a big difference for Texas as well, and, be able to put a little bit less pressure on Manning, and, especially too, as I mentioned, to the offensive line being a little bit on the younger side and some transfers coming into. It's going to take a little bit for them to gel too, especially thinking about moving forward. When I look at this 2025 schedule, they have at Ohio State on August 30th too, and that's going to be one hell of a game.
And it's one that I think, both teams lost a lot from last year, so they're going to be 2 completely new teams. But I don't know. I think it's still going to be a great game regardless, because both teams are 2 of the most talented in the country. So I have no idea who's going to win that game. Texas. Now, I do know this. Whoever wins that game is going to be, like, the hype is going to be in overdrive for that team, just because, if Texas wins, they win to Columbus and won. It's going to be insane hype. If Ohio State wins, they beat Texas. They beat Arch Manning. Like, it's no matter who wins that game, they're going to be incredibly overhyped going into the rest of the year. So.
Especially if it's an ass whooping, because if they if Texas goes to Columbus and just straight up throws them around, and they rattle Julian Sayin, and the defense isn't really kind of coming together like they thought, it could definitely turn some heads a little bit too, especially as Ohio State goes and tries to win another national title under Ryan Day too.
Yeah.
And in terms of Texas too, I mean, I know we mainly kind of focused on the offense on this, on this episode too. Are there any other things about Texas's, offense in general that either gives you some hesitation or just some other recruits that you're excited about seeing?
On offense or just in general?
We can throw it out just in general. Anyone that's kind of caught your eye in the past couple of weeks as you've been watching spring ball and prepping for the episode and everything too.
I think one guy, a guy Texas fans are going to know who he is. Colin Simmons, their outside linebacker. They kind of put him in a variety of different positions, and they use him a lot of different ways. He had 9 sacks last year as a freshman. Like, he's a stud. Number 11 for Texas is a stud. I'm really excited to see him kind of take that next step. Like I said, CJ Baxter, I'm really excited to see him be fully healthy, going into this camp. And I'm really excited. I think he can take over for all the production they lost in the run game. I'm really excited for him. The big thing for me is just, and this isn't a Texas issue, this is just, I believe that football is ultimately won and lost on the lines of scrimmage. I've always believed that. They have 40% of their offensive line production returning. That's not – it's not horrible, but it's not great. So I'm interested to see the Texas offensive line and how they kind of gel and come together, especially because Sark, they run more of an RPO style. So it's even more complicated in a way because they're running a bunch of RPOs where the offensive line, they can't get downfield. A lot of times they can't just explode off. They kind of have to hesitate a little bit. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how the offensive line is going to gel first and foremost.
Yeah, and especially too because statistically speaking, Texas is one of the best defenses in all of the entire country last year. But again, one of the criticisms that they got was, hey, a lot of these quote unquote dominant performances they had were against cupcake teams too. Because even I look at the schedule a little bit here, and obviously we talked about Ohio State. The other big game is going to be November 15th when they travel to Georgia again too. That will definitely be a pretty fascinating game, and obviously they always play Texas A&M too. But you're right though. I would say for me, the offensive line is definitely be a big question mark too, because the whole Quinn Ewers injury, it wasn't just one time. It was multiple instances of kind of small injuries that I think you're right. It ultimately ended up adding up, especially when I go back and think of the SEC championship game too. I think that's another one that kind of comes to my mind too.
They really struggled in the red zone because he couldn't zip the ball. Like, I don't know. That's just what I saw watching it, And if you didn't put Arch in when your red zone offense was really, really struggling, I feel like you kind of need to pump the brakes a little bit on Arch Manning. But I feel that way about everyone. Like, I need to see the hype to believe it. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And I think I do the same thing to some degree because I as somebody who I guess follows it all year round, I find myself getting into the hype a little bit too much. But also when I talk to people like you who are just as passionate about college football I am, you can kind of reel it in a little bit and be like, oh yeah, remember in 2024 where, Texas's defense definitely took a lot of the pressure off yours, but then at the same time you go back and think to yourself, hey, they didn't use Wingo as much as they should have. They had a crazy good offensive line. So it's just like things like that all end up kind of coming to fruition in that way.
Yep. All right. Do you want to talk LSU now?